This stavishta, grossly material, cha, and staviyasam, of all matter, yatra, wherein, idam, all these phenomena, vyajyate, is experienced, vishvam, universe, bhutam, past, bhavyam, future, bhavat, present, cha, and sat, resultant. Translation: this gigantic manifestation of the phenomenal material world as a whole is the personal body of the absolute truth, wherein the universal resultant, past, present, and future of material time is experienced. Purport: anything either material or spiritual is but an expansion of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as stated in Bhagavad Gita 13:13, the omnipotent Lord has his transcendental eyes, heads, and other bodily parts distributed everywhere. He can see, hear, touch, or manifest himself anywhere and everywhere, for he is present everywhere as the super soul of all infinitesimal souls, although he has his particular abode in the absolute world. The relative world is also his phenomenal representation, because it is nothing but an expansion of his transcendental energy. Although he is in his abode, his energy is distributed everywhere, just as the sun is localized as well as expanded everywhere, since the rays of the sun, being non-different from the sun, are accepted as expansions of the sun disk. In the Vishnu Purana, it is said that as fire expands its rays and heat from one place, similarly the Supreme Spirit, the personality of Godhead, expands himself by his manifold energy everywhere and anywhere. The phenomenal manifestation of the gigantic universe is only a part of his Virat body. Less intelligent men cannot conceive of the transcendental, all-spiritual form of the Lord, but they are astonished by his different energies, just as the Aborigines are struck with wonder by the manifestation of lightning, a gigantic mountain, or a hugely expanded banyan tree. The Aborigines praise the strength of the tiger and the elephant because of their superior energy and strength. The Asuras cannot recognize the existence of the Lord, although there are vivid descriptions of the Lord in the revealed scriptures. Although the Lord incarnation exhibits his uncommon strength and energy, and although he is accepted as the Supreme Personality of God by learned scholars and saints like Vasudeva, Narada, Asita, and Devala in the past, and by Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, as also by the Acharyas like Shankar, Ramanuja, Madhva, and Lord Sri Chaitanya in the modern age. The Asuras do not accept any evidential proof from the real scriptures, nor do they recognize the authority of the great Acharyas. They want to see with their own eyes at once. Therefore, they can see the gigantic body of the Lord as Virat, which will answer their challenge. And since they are accustomed to paying homage to superior material strength like that of the tiger, elephant, and lightning, they can also offer respect to the Virat Rupa. Lord Krishna, by the request of Arjuna, exhibited his Virat Rupa for the Asuras. A pure devotee of the Lord, being unaccustomed to looking into such a mundane, gigantic form of the Lord, requires special vision for that purpose. The Lord therefore favored Arjuna with special vision for looking into his Virat Rupa, which is described in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. This Virat Rupa of the Lord was especially manifested, not for the benefit of Arjuna, but for the unintelligent class of men who accept anyone and everything as an incarnation of the Lord, and so mislead the general mass of people. For them, the indication is that one should ask the chief incarnation to exhibit his Virat Rupa, and thus he be established as an incarnation. The Virat Rupa manifestation of the Lord is simultaneously a challenge to the atheists and a favor for the asuras who can think of the Lord as Virat and thus gradually cleanse the dirty things from their hearts in order to become qualified to actually see the transcendental form of the Lord in the near future. This is a favor of the all-merciful Lord to the atheists and the gross materialists. Translation: this gigantic manifestation of the phenomenal material world as a whole is the personal body of the absolute truth, wherein the universal resultant past, present, and future of material time is experienced. So this is another verse on what is called the Virat Rupa, or the universal form. This means that we imagine the Supreme Lord, who is actually spiritual, to have a body. And that body is a gigantic body. In fact, the whole universe. So it's an extraordinary material body that we're imagining here. And it's imaginary because we don't actually see it with our eyes. In modern science, I think they try to measure the diameter of the universe, which is a combination of all the galaxies, which are in the millions or billions, and each galaxy contains millions and billions of stars in it. So it's a huge affair, a huge expanse. I think 21 zeros, 20 plus 21 zeros after that, whatever that figure is. It's a speculative size of the universe. So it's pretty big. So that's the size, and of course that's the size of the universal form. So it's a rather huge person. But the idea behind the universal form is it's not just as we may, I think the universe they say is a kind of a big mass like this with a hole in the middle or something like that. That's the speculative shape of the universe. So that's not what this is. This is universe in the form of a person with a head, arms, trunk, feet, etc., and senses, everything, like a person. So it's like a personal conception of the universe. Of course, people will object to this and say, well, you're just imposing our human like form upon an imaginary God or something who is the whole universe, so why has to be a human form? Why not something else? Like that. So, but nevertheless, it is imaginary, so it's not exactly the form of the Lord, but the idea is it is personal. It is a person. It is a personality who ultimately in the spiritual world acts just like us. And he has emotions and feelings and whatever, he experiences bliss, etc. Which is a little bit surprising to us in the modern world, because we'll say, well, then you're thinking that God is something like us. And we're projecting our forms upon something else we don't know about. So from a material point of view, we can say that's fine, and to some degree it is true. However, it's impossible for us to actually speculate on what the form is. Is it personal? Does it look human? Does it look animal? Does it look geometric or whatever? Is it spherical? Is it square? Is it toroidal or whatever? We don't know. We could speculate forever, and similarly, the scientists can also speculate about what is the universe, or what is the form of God. So, of course, ultimately, we know that the form of the universe is this one is imaginary, making the universe into a form of a person. So we're not taking it as literal, but it's a conception in order to establish that behind this universe, whatever shape it has, there is a person. That's the main idea, who is spiritual, and it's reflected in this material form. So the whole attempt here is made to imagine this form simply so that people who are stuck in the material world with material conceptions appreciate to some degree that God has a personal form, that's all. Even though it's not a real form. Because everyone is stuck in the material world. Okay, we'll give this material world a form, and like this with a head and arms, etc. So for that purpose. So anyway, as I said, we have to speculate on our own what's the form of that actual of God in the spiritual world, because we don't know, and you cannot understand that form or who God is, whatever, with your material intelligence and your mind and with your material senses. You can never do that. Not available. So therefore, it's beyond science, beyond material science. You cannot discuss it at all. Which leads us to the problem, well now what are we going to do? How do we conclude about God? So from a material point of view, nothing. You can't do anything. You can just speculate or disleave it. So that's what in modern world we have what are called agnostics in science. They say there may be a God or there may not be a God, we don't know, but we can't say anything about it as far as science is concerned. An atheist will say, no, we can prove by science there is no God, like that. But agnostic will say, well, okay, science cannot really go into that area at all with material logic. So we cannot say God exists or doesn't exist or what form he's got. We can't say at all. So that's a little more neutral than the atheist who's very boldly saying that we can explain everything by material logic. So we still have that problem. So the other solution, which is not accepted by modern science, and that is to accept another authority, an authority on spiritual subject matters, and then we simply accept the authority. So that means we accept the authority of scriptures. So that, of course, will be rejected by modern science, but modern science itself also accepts scripture in the form of scientific textbooks. It's also a type of scripture, because a lot of that is also speculative or whatever, and they're talking about Darwin's theory of evolution, but it's not really proved or whatever, and they have to modify it and keep modifying as time goes on. Or Einstein's theory of relativity. Okay, we accept it kind of, but we can't ultimately prove it. So all of that it's all like it's got a lot of speculation in there also, but we accept it because practically we can use that information in modern world to make machines and whatever. So therefore there is some, and then so we accept that as an authority even though we can't really prove everything there. So in one sense that is like a scripture for the scientist. So for spiritual things it's more difficult because you can't prove anything really, by material means. So we accept the scriptures, the spiritual scriptures, as the authority to tell us about existence of God, how he exists, what he does, what does he look like, shape, form, activities, etc. We have to rely on scripture only. It's beyond material logic. So why should we accept it at all? And you don't have to. Just as we don't have to accept the scientific textbook, we don't have to accept the conclusions and theories of Einstein or later scientists. We don't have to. It's a matter of your faith. So if you've got that faith, you'll accept the scientific textbook and go to school and study them and memorize them and do something with them. So similarly, if you have the faith, then you'll accept the scriptures that talk about the existence of God. It's a matter of faith, that's all. So, of course, it's easier for people to have faith in material things because they get material results from it, and then they can say, okay, this proves that this is like this. So it's easier. But sometimes it's misleading because things don't work out in science also all the time either, and they end up with problems there. But again, if one has faith in Scripture, then that's another type of faith, and we can also prove it by results. So why has science gone on for the last 400 years or however it's gone on in the modern world? Because they got results from it. They were able to invent different things like locomotives and airplanes and whatever, all these things, modern inventions. cell phones and all that, 5G, all sorts of things, and they have practical results from all this so-called science. So in that sense, yeah, it really works in that sense. So it works for material purposes. Of course, we see side effects don't work sometimes. You get sick from them, or it's dangerous for you, whatever. So all the effects are not good either. So it's not perfect science. It's not perfectly healthy for you, in other words. But anyway, so you get results from that. So again, we can do the same thing with scriptures. How does it? How can we prove it? So if we generally, Scripture is also very practical. So it tells you to do things, and if you do things, you get results from it. And as I said the other day, ultimately the whole purpose of Scripture is to make you happy. So if you can get happier when you follow the Scripture, good. And if it doesn't do anything to you, fine, okay. But this is somewhat, we can say, subjective, experiential. Depends on individuals. Yeah, I got a good experience. Other people say, I didn't get any good experience like that. So it's a little bit subjective in that sense, but and therefore a little more difficult to prove than modern science and its practical nature. Nevertheless, if we look over a long period of time, over a lot of people who are following the Scripture, then we will see if there's some good conclusion. Yeah? So what is a long period of time? In terms of modern science, it's only like 300 or 400 years. If we go back to the Scriptures, then of course we can take the Scriptures back thousands and thousands of years. And they didn't reject them after 1,000 years. As, no, we tried this 1,000 years, it didn't work, let's throw it out. It's not spiritual, it doesn't make us happy. So they didn't do that. They kept it for another 1,000 years, and they kept it for another 1,000 years, and they kept it for another 1,000 years, and another 1,000 years. So this, of course, materially speaking, 5,000 Vedas are 5,000 years old, and it was preserved and kept as something very valuable for the human being. At first, just by recitation and by memory. It was all passed down by, oral tradition as being very, very valuable. For thousands of years passed on like that. Why would they do that if it was useless? It was just some, mumbo-jumbo mantras or something for no particular purpose that didn't work. Why would they preserve them and hand them down and by tradition for 5,000 years? But they did. Why? Because it had good effect. It was valuable for them. It contributed to their life. And of course these Scriptures, everything else vanished. There's no more houses and stuff. All these things have disappeared with time. But the Scriptures continue. And still they study them. Still they memorize them, whatever, analyze them. So after 5,000 years, those same Scriptures have come down. So that shows that they had some value for the people. They gave something very valuable to the people. What did they give to the people? Of course, good knowledge, and ultimately it made them better people, made them happier people. So they got their happiness out of that. So that's one proof. It's over 5,000 years that it happened like this. So therefore, over a long period of time, and it's not just one or two people, it's a whole civilization. The whole civilization continued with this tradition over time, up until the present time. Of course, we know that the modern world is such that we got the modern culture coming in, modern civilization, which kind of destroys all the old cultures. So that's there even in India. But it's still remarkable that even in India, with all of its modern confusion, whatever, with a mixture of cultures, etc., that still somehow it remains there. So still very, very a strong tendency is there in spite of all of the modern influences, so that like if they had the story of Rama that went on for how many years it went on? 2 years or something, whatever. Every week they would have a little 1 hour or half hour episode on Ramchandra. And everybody in India, even the Muslims, would be looking at that. So they're all getting some taste out of hearing the story of Ramchandra, It goes on for 1 year, 2 years like this. And same with Mahabharata. Everybody's absorbed in it for 1 year. And no, it's not a propaganda thing at all. It's just that people naturally, they got attracted to it as part of their tradition. So the tradition has continued for thousands of years somehow, and it satisfies the people in general, not just the high intellectual people, the mass of people in general, even the villagers and whatever, laborers, everybody. So very interesting how that scripture can go on for thousands of years like this. And people take it. So that's, you can say, one proof that it has some value. It's continued for so long. Whereas I said modern science has got a history of 400 years or so maybe. And the Vedas have a version of 5,000 years, so much more. So there's a type of proof we can say, okay, the Vedas must have some value because they preserved for 5,000 years and people still believe in them. So, and they must get something out of them because of that. So therefore, not wrong to have faith in them to develop spiritual life, etc. So, like that. So anyway, that's it's a matter of faith that we accept the scriptures. So when we do accept the scriptures, then of course, I also mentioned the other day that the scriptures also cater to different types of people, because the scripture realizes that people are at different levels. So therefore it gives different conclusions for different people so that they can attain and understand and have different goals according to their level of consciousness. So some of the portions of the Vedas start on a low level, some on a little more level, like this. But ultimately, we should look for the highest level that is in the scripture. So it's compared to, let's say, like a flower. The flower starts as a little bud, then it continues for some weeks like that. Then it starts opening the petals a little bit. And then after a few weeks, it gets like that. And then finally, after a month or so, it's fully opened. So scripture is like that. Some portions are like the little bud, all knotted up. Some a little bit open, some a little bit open. So different scriptures will reveal different things, different processes, different goals, as the consciousness of the human being develops from one level to another. So we got the more basic type of thing and consciousness. Then we get a little bit higher developed consciousness, higher. And so therefore there'll be different subjects in the Vedas for different types of people. But we should say go for the highest one of all. So at the bottom, then we get this universal form one. Okay, you can't think of anything, you can't think of a Supreme Lord or anything. At least think of the world. At least the world is real. Accept the world is real. And if you accept the world is real, eventually you can accept God is real, even though he's not material. So we accept a real world, and then we have a cause of the world who's also real. So accept the real world. And then not only accept the world as real, but think of it as having a cause, even if the cause is not really transcendental. At least there's a cause there. So in this case, the cause of the material world is this form. The world takes a form of a human-like form, and that becomes your cause. So this is the universal form. So it's not a very advanced type of realization. And as Prabhupada mentions here in the purport, the Aborigines are worshiping the mountain or the fire or the sun or whatever is supreme like that. So this is the universal form is an enlargement upon that idea that we just take material things as the highest. So the sun is supreme because it's got power like that. And of course, this is not just Aborigines. We'll find this in the Vedas also. So we have the sun worshippers in India also. They worship the sun as the absolute, the Surya Bhaktas. So they worship the sun god. And then we have people worshiping the rain god, Indra. Or we get them worshiping rivers or mountains, etc. So it's not simply primitive societies. Even in Vedas, they're doing the same thing. They worship devatas, so to speak. And the devatas are in charge of aspects of material world, like the weather and the sunlight and the water and the air and fire, etc. So But that's a material level. We're worshiping fire because it's powerful, or the sun because it's powerful. But behind that is a person. So we have the Devata. We have the fire Devata behind the fire, Agni, who is a person. A material person, but he's a person. He controls fire. Or we have the wind Devata, who's managing the weather. Except the water, Varuna, the water deity, who is in charge of all the water, etc. So we got personalities in charge of the elements. So that's a little step above just element. There's some person controlling and giving power to that element as well. So that's basically what the Devata is. And if you worship that Devata, then you get the favor of the Devata, you get the favor of that element. Worship the sun god, then you get nice sunlight. You worship the rain god, you'll get some rain. So this is the idea behind the Devata worship in India. So that's there in the Vedic literature itself. But it's the lowest level. That's the lowest level. Then if you go a little beyond that, then we stick them all together, stick all the Devatas together into one big form. And all the elements together into one big form, and this is where we get the universal form. Everything, all the Devatas and all the elements and all the planets and everything you can think of in the material, stick it into one body. So this is the next form, the conglomeration of all the Devatas and all the elements and all the planets. That's called the universal form. And then you worship that form. Still, it's material. So later on there will be descriptions of this universal form in different ways. One is to take the whole universe and then all the planetary levels. In other words, the universe is divided into 14 levels of planets, 14 lokas, where there are residents in all levels, and from the lowest level of consciousness to the highest level. So Brahmaloka is on the top with the most refined consciousness, and Patalaloka is on the bottom with the most depraved consciousness. So we get living entities of all sorts, of all 14 levels of consciousness, all the way up to the most refined level of consciousness in this universe. So these are called the lokas. So the body, the universal form, is composed of all of these lokas. So the top is the head, and at the head we have Brahmaloka, the most refined consciousness, and then the foot is the lowest. We get the Patalaloka, the degraded consciousness at the bottom, and in between we get the various gradations of consciousness. So that's one way of looking at the universal form, mentioned here in the Bhagavatam. Another is to not just associate with the body, but with the senses. So we have different senses like the eye and the ear and the nose and the voice, etc., hands, feet. So the universal form also has senses and organs like we have, to show that the universal form also is a person. And it can do things and see things and think things, etc. So it's just like us, that whole universal form. In other words, it's a person. That universal form of matter is a person. So we have like the eye or the ear or the voice of that universal form. But these are attached to elements. So for instance, the voice has fire element as its element. Then it has the fire Devata there also. So it's connected to a Devata and to the fire element. And similarly the eyes with Surya, the deity of the sun, like that. Or the mind is associated with the moon and the moon Devata, like that. So we got a whole series of Devatas attached to your different senses in your body, like this. Or this universal body, at least. And therefore this gives us the understanding that the universe is not just the matter, but it's connected to a person, the Devata, in charge of that element, who activates that element. And then when it's activated, then that universal form can see or can speak or can use his hands or use his feet, etc. So it's not impersonal. There's the Devatas behind that. So that's another aspect of that universal form. So in any case, the idea is that this is the primitive conception. It's the most, let's say, there is some plan behind the material world, just as there's a plan behind your material body. It's not just a bunch of elements. The elements are arranged in a certain way with a certain purpose so that you can see, or you can taste, or you can smell, or you can hear. So the whole universe is arranged. It's not just chance that it's got happened. It's arranged in a certain way with a certain purpose. So that we have animals and plants and human beings, etc., who have senses, who have experiences and do things. And so the idea is the universe has a goal in mind. It's not just a haphazard arrangement. It's planned with a certain way, with a certain ability to get knowledge and experience things. That's the whole idea of the universe. So it's a little bit different conception from science, which says, oh, well, everything just kind of accidentally evolved, and suddenly we got some cells together, and they made bigger cells, and they made things, and finally we get human beings, and then it just happened by chance like that. So this is opposite. No, it's happening with a direct intent there. There's a form there. There's eyes. There's senses, etc. Already planned out ahead of time in the matter itself. And then they manifest at a certain point as animals and plants and human beings, etc. So it's all planned out very carefully. Now, of course, and then behind that we say, well, then what's the big plan? So the big plan ultimately is to elevate your consciousness. And as a human being, we have that opportunity to elevate so that we can get beyond this whole material world completely. But then that's a little bit indirect, so we have to start at the bottom with the universal form aspect. So this is a very elementary type of presentation of introduction to a personal God. That's all it is. Okay, any question there?
When you're talking about the universal form, then remembering some seminars you gave previously where you said if a yogi and Jnani practices without a tinge of bhakti, then they kind of achieve their goal. And I was just recently reading Canto 3, chapter 32, and you mentioned that the yogis and the Jnanis, they don't go directly back to Godhead. When there's the annihilation, the second annihilation, they merge into the body of Lord Brahma, and then they go back to Godhead. So they still go back to Godhead?
Well, it depends. You can't attain the spiritual world with a personal form unless you practice bhakti. So if you just do yoga or jnana, then you're very limited in how far you go. Ultimately, you can get up to Brahman, impersonal liberation, and merge without developing a real form. If you mix bhakti with that, of course, even to get that far, you have to have a little bhakti there. If the bhakti increases, then you can actually have a mixed type of bhakti with jnana Mr. Bhakti or yoga Mr. Bhakti. Then you can actually go to the spiritual world. But again, the extent of your activity is limited, maybe to Shantarasa, like that. So it depends on the person, his intention, and the mixture, or whatever, with the bhakti that he does, what type of goal he gets. Huh? What's that?
Do they only get up to the stage of Vaikuntha, not Goloka, Vrindavan?
Well, to get to Goloka, it's very difficult even for advanced people, and you have to worship Krishna with great dedication and chant Hare Krishna to get there. If you don't do that, you're not going to get there. So you have to give up all of that completely, and just practice very, let's say, intimate type of bhakti for Krishna alone and nothing else. If you start mixing it, then that impedes your progress. Yeah.
If you're not group of the universal, for most people it's imaginary, it's conceptualized.
Yeah.
But there was a universal form, of course, shown to Arjuna, where he was given the divine. That universal form was a reality, at least for Arjuna. So most people conceptualize it, but Arjuna actually saw it when he saw the divine, given the vision to see it. So you could say, you could make a distinction there, could you?
Yeah, and we could say that the universal form that Arjuna saw was actually real in one sense, because the Lord manifested that form at the request of Arjuna. But at the same time, it's not a permanent spiritual form in the spiritual world. So we say in that sense it's imaginary, because afterwards Arjuna said, well, I don't want to see that form anymore. Please take that form away. And suddenly just disappeared like that. And then Krishna was back to his two-arm form and his four-arm form. So it's a very temporary manifestation that Krishna can give to people. They can see it. But it's actually not a spiritual form in the eternal spiritual form. So that's why we say it's imaginary. Yeah.
Also, even though religion has been in existence for a long time, many have said it's a weakness of human society. Have to rely, it's due to their weakness.
Yeah, I think Karl Marx said it's the opium of the people.
And also, they point to, look at, all right, people feel, you made a statement that people feel better by it, but actually there's been a lot of wars. And I think many people point to the fact that religion causing wars. So what do we have to say about that?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's just like science also is very good. It's also very bad. You can also get war from science. Science produces bombs, atomic bombs, nuclear weapons, other type of weapons, chemical weapons, and biological weapons, all coming from science. So science is also very dangerous. So it's not all good in one sense. So religion itself, we can say the core is good and beneficial for the human being. We can also misuse it by corrupting it in different ways, and then we get bad results as well. So that's why we do have to have some guidelines about what we define as a religion, and also to define inferior and superior types of religion, and we want to call it religion, or spiritual development, and very, very carefully discern which is the superior one. Otherwise, we can get confused and follow some path which leads us off in the wrong direction, and then we end up with all sorts of problems as well. It may result in other words, religion can get influenced by politics and so many other things. And then we can make material judgments using that or whatever, and we end up with a lot of problems. So, if we corrupt a religion, then it can be definitely used materially and end up with a lot of bad results. But we can say that about anything in this world, including science and whatever. Any knowledge is, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So drink deep or don't take it at all. I think Alexander Pope said that. So if you use knowledge in the wrong way, fine, you're going to end up with bad results. And that's why the Vedas were restricted. They don't want to give them to the demons, the knowledge. Otherwise, they misuse it and they, end up with making machines that destroy people or something. So therefore, everything has to be very carefully given to people so that they don't misuse it.
In one sense, you can understand why some people don't follow.
Out of frustration. But that's like throwing away the baby with the bathwater or something, isn't it? Yeah. We can see also due to religion, what do we have? We got benefits. So because of religion, music developed in the Western culture. So all that first music of Bach and others developed from the religion itself. Masses, oratorios, and all that came out of religion. And all the Renaissance art was first coming from religion. Sistine Chapel and all this, Michelangelo, all that came from religion. So it was very intimately, the culture was related to that in the beginning, then it started veering off afterwards. But it was we got some beneficial things and you get some bad things. Because of the limitations that religion set on science, science attacked religion in the Western culture, and they defeated it finally. First of all, the religious people were persecuting the Galileo and Copernicus and all these people and burning them at the stake or whatever, because it's not right what you're saying, because they took the Greek science. The Christians took the Greek science, and then the scientists found out it was wrong. And then when they said it's wrong, then the church attacked them and said, no, this is our science in the Bible, but it wasn't actually, it was Greek. And then they persecuted them, but then finally science won. So there was a war between science and religion, because religion was restricting thought process. That didn't take place in India. There was no restriction on that. Nobody got burned at the stake for, saying the earth is spherical or anything like that. I think Aryabhata said that in 100 AD or something. He said the earth is spherical, but nobody burned him at the stake. He was a Brahmin. He also studied the Vedas. So there wasn't that war between religion and science at that time. In other words, the Vedas did not restrict scientific development. But that happened in the West. The two were warring with each other. So that's why they ended up in this position. And then people reject religion as being, superstition, etc.
It's quite interesting you talk at this point about the war between science and religion.
Yeah.
If you look at all the major universities, for instance, in the UK, US, etc., they're all founded on religion.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
All the colleges in Oxford are all founded on very soundly on religion.
Yeah. Oh, probably. Do they have a church origin, actually, those main colleges? Yeah. Because the knowledge itself was carried on by the church in the Middle Ages, because nothing else was there. So they preserved the libraries, and then they started studying and whatever like that. So the knowledge, even secular knowledge, started out on that level, but then I started, a conflict developed later on, I think in the 16th century or something like that.
So following up on the point of the Maimonides, you made the point that one of, if you like, a praman we could use for establishing the authenticity of the Veda is that this modern science has been going on for 400 years or so.
Yeah.
Yet the Veda has been active in written form for 1,000 years or more.
Yeah.
But then the scientists may say, but that's just primitive superstition.
But why would they have superstitions continuing so long by so many people?
Primitive people.
But we say they weren't primitive because they had developed very early, before the Western world had developed. Aryabhata had made theories, and Bhaskaracharya made trigonometry and calculus, and they did a lot of things. They weren't so primitive after all. They developed science, they developed mathematics long before that happened in the West, 1,000 years, 2,000 years ahead of time. So they weren't primitive. We can say, well, they are primitive because they believe in God, but then that's just a prejudice also. Somebody has some question there.
Oh, can I ask a question now? I have my hand up already.
I just think it's probably worth at this conjecture, at this junction, to mention that Krishna consciousness and the process of bhakti yoga is not a religion.
Well, yeah, I was thinking of religion in a more general sense, yeah. Non-sectarian.
Non-sectarian. We're not Hindus, we're not this, we're not that.
Yeah.
This, one birth you can be a Hindu, another birth you can be a Jew, another birth you can be, a Christian.
Yeah.
But the process of Krishna consciousness is an eternal practice.
Which is all-encompassing and does not label people one way or the other. So this is when we put the labels on the religions, that's when we start getting the conflicts. And we say, my religion's better than your religion because of this, this, and this. In other words, we distinguish it by its material characteristics, and then we put down the other religions because of that. So what we're presenting here is, it's not a religion in that sense. We're not dealing with temporary culture or bodies or standards, etc. We're talking about the soul, or the Atma, which is eternal, which is completely separate from the body and its birth anywhere in the world. So, and then what is the nature of Atma and how can that develop? So that's the basis of what we call our religion, so to speak, but it's actually beyond religion in that sense. It's not bound by time and space and whatever, and normal doctrines.
also one more point, Maharaj, is that if we travel in India, we see there is some very ancient temple, thousands and millions of years ago, and the scientists cannot figure out how they carved this temple, how they put them together. Some are carved inside a mountain, some are made of solid granite, some there is a huge stone 200 feet on top. They can't figure it out. So if these people were primitive, like the Aborigines, so how did they build this?
Yeah, well, definitely it's beyond Aboriginal cultures. It just had a few stone weapons and a few spears. They had very high development of architectural things, engineering feats, all of this, and in terms of material advancement and material science.
Just a point of interest now in relation to religion and wars. Maharaj told me there's a book that was compiled by historians around the world and analysed something like 3,500 different wars and the causes of those wars. And the cause of war by religious causes was 6.8%.
Oh, very little.
Interestingly enough, the highest cause was that around 50% was fought over women.
What does that mean? The king was envious and he wanted to get the other woman, so they fought over the kingdom over a woman. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.